gotta kick a man while he's down, right? You just gotta kick a man while he's down, right? Yeah.
So in case you guys missed it, Game 6, Eastern Conference semifinals, New York Knicks beat the Boston Celtics 119-81. And yes, this is an MMA show. You didn't click on the wrong video, but we have to talk about it because obviously you're a huge Celtics fan. And if anybody has looked at my hat in the past year, I'm pretty much always wearing a Knicks hat on this show. And that's not really on purpose. I just like the hat. And I like the Knicks. But yeah, so Game 6, the New York Knicks win 119-81. They move on to the Eastern Conference semifinals, officially ending the title defense of the Boston Celtics. And yeah, man, I guess.
And that's it, everybody. Thanks for tuning into the show.
This is leaving the podcast. You just can't take it anymore.
Yeah, I've got a flight to catch.
All right, I'll see you, buddy. But no, for real, this kind of will relate to fights in the end of it, which you guys are probably wondering how, but we'll get into it a little bit. So Friday night, the Knicks are playing the Celtics, obviously, and we went to Buffalo Wild Wings with our friend Brooke. Shout out, Brooke, and another Knicks fan. And we watched Game 6, and we got to witness you seeing the collapse of your championship team.
Got to witness me crash out.
Literally, quite a few times, as the intro showed. But, so yeah, afterwards...
That doesn't happen very often, either. I'm a pretty reserved guy.
You're a level-headed dude. That is for sure. But then, afterwards, we ended up going to this club, and me and Brooke were pretty happy, obviously. You weren't. I think, we were drinking to celebrate, and you were drinking more so probably to just, forget what happened. And, but... yeah, man, that was a fun time.
I need a drink right now.
Maybe we got to play another drunk guess. What was the game that we played a while back? It was guessing UFC pay-per-views. Is that what it was?
No.
That was a different one. I don't remember, but...
it was, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that video is no longer public for a few reasons. But we're not going to talk about that.
It's a part of our intro in which I'm wearing a Celtics hoodie.
It is. Oh, my God.
And I look visibly just like how I feel today.
Just deflated.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, anyway, we were hanging out there at the club after. The bouncer actually was making fun of you. He came back inside to make fun of you for the Celtics lose. That was one of the funniest things I thought happened that night, is because we got in there, we were hanging out at the bar, and the Knicks post-game stuff was on the TV, and he just came around the corner, looks at the TV, and then looked at you, and I forget exactly what he said, but it's just the fact that he came in to seek you out one more time made my night. But to get to the end of this night and to kind of get into the fights, obviously, because we do have to get into that, because there's plenty of UFC news this week, but...
thank God.
Yeah, Tiz is happy we don't have to spend the whole show talking about this. But, so, like I said, I was celebrating the Knicks' victory. This is the furthest they've gotten in my lifetime. And I won't say how many whiskeys that I had, but I had a lot. And I think we also had, the green tea shot, too, and I don't really remember if there was anything else. But you guys left a little earlier than I did, and... I was going home by Uber, and my driver, and the text that I sent you, I swear I don't even remember sending you the text, but the driver, his name was Marab. I was like, Tiz, you're never gonna believe this. My Uber driver, it's Marab. He gets there. It is obviously not the UFC bantamweight champion, Marab Valashvili, although I wish it was. Actually, no, I don't wish it was, because that would be pretty bad if he needed to drive from here. But
Marab's in New Jersey a lot, pretty early for his fight. He's driving Uber to pass the time.
But yeah, so Marab obviously drives me home. I thought that was pretty fun, but. Yeah, anyway, I'll we'll go away from your suffering. We do have a lot of UFC stuff to talk about. We're only going to talk about the main event of the Apex card. But besides that, like there was a ton of news, fighter acquisitions, fight bookings, definitely a lot to talk about. And we definitely want to get into that. But first, we'll start with the Apex main event because that was a pretty crazy performance by Michael Morales. And in case you guys didn't see it, Michael Morales knocks out Gilbert Burns in the first round of their fight within a few minutes. And really where I want to start with this is like Morales knocks out Burns in the first round. No one has ever done this to Gilbert Burns. Like we've seen Gilbert Burns lose fights, obviously, but I can't think of a time where I've seen Gilbert Burns at his best at welterweight get destroyed like this and pretty much just ran through by Michael Morales. And yes, Gilbert is 38. He's getting a bit old. He's had some losses, but I don't think that Gilbert is over the hill in any stretch. That's just me personally. I think that. And either way, like even if you do think that Gilbert like is not really in his prime anymore, when have we seen anyone do that to him? Michael Morales, obviously he was way bigger too. I think he had like an 8-inch reach advantage, and he's taller. Basically every way he was bigger than Gilbert, and just the prowess he showed on the feet was just so impressive to me, and the way he starched Gilbert like that was just amazing. And I think that this is another guy who's going to be around in the welterweight division for a really long time. And I think the welterweight division's in an amazing spot right now, as we'll get to. But just to focus on the fight itself, I mean, dude, when you saw Morales do that to Burns, like, what was your first reaction?
It's a new era of sorts in UFC. Because the kid had already been undefeated coming into this point, but obviously getting a main event against Gilbert Burns, he's being recognized for that. But now, at least from the viewer standpoint, and just the fan base in general, I think Michael Morales kind of quickly became sort of a household name, at least in the welterweight division now, because and already the most interesting division in UFC. It's kind of hard to. It's already hard to break into that top 10 anyways by winning a fight, but to really get those big money fights, those main events, you gotta do stuff like this to people like Gilbert Burns that are even Gilbert Burns in just this very short fight alone. He kind of like blitzed him with the takedown up against the cage, and Michael Morales just elbows in the clinch, and I mean
Burns kind of had to though, right?
Yeah.
He was getting pieced up. You could tell the moment where Gilbert was like, "Okay, I got to get this fight to the ground now."
What I'm saying is Michael Morales didn't look rattled at all.
No,
and it's gonna go a long way for this guy.
Says a lot too, like about his composure. I mean, this guy's only 25 years old. I mean, me and you are 23, so like this dude's 2 years older than us and just destroyed Gilbert Burns, and here we are sitting in my kitchen talking about it.
Yeah, and I just called him a kid too.
Yeah, it's like Dana White. I love when Dana White will call like a 38-year-old kid. Like this kid, he'll talk about Stipe. Like this kid is so good. It's like, I mean, he's a bit older than that now, but yeah, I mean, just all jokes aside, Michael Morales, that win over Gilbert was so impressive. I mean, he was bigger, he was stronger, he was more powerful, he was faster. He just beat him pretty much in every way. Like you said, he did good in the grappling realm, even though obviously that didn't really last very long because he defended the takedown well.
What I'm really trying to get out too about it being just a new sort of era, and what I think people like Michael Morales are really redefining what it means to be an athlete in the UFC and just MMA in general. Because I mean, you talked about this, the size difference, the reach advantage, and just age obviously too, but that's lesser because Michael Morales, I think clearly some tells me he just came off the best training camp of his career, and it's only going to ramp up from here, and he's got plenty to give. So, I mean, yes, once we do get further, we're going to see 5-round fights. We'll see if it needs all 5 rounds.
Well, technically this one
Technically, yes. This one,
He just got it out of
that
there so
is
quickly.
true. That is very true.
I do think when he fights some of these other guys at the top right now who are definitely like in their primes, I think it'll get tougher. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean it's wild what's happened with this division. I think welterweight is arguably the best division in the UFC right now. We're seeing a legit change of the guard. I mean, Buckley beating Colby Covington, and now he's going to be fighting Kamaru Usman. You know, Bilal Muhammad just lost the belt to Jack Della Maddalena. Leon Edwards losing to Sean Brady. Like, we're starting to see these newer contenders come up. And the thing that I love about these guys is that they want to fight each other. It's not like that past welterweight generation that they liked sitting on their rankings. They wouldn't fight that often. These guys all want to fight each other and they want to prove that they're the best in the cage. And I think that that makes for a really fun era that's going to be coming at welterweight, and it's going to be a good
yeah,
time.
and I can't believe how much more interesting it got with Islam now.
Yeah, and we can get into that too. I mean, because you know, one of the other things we wanted to talk about was just all of the fights that are coming
Dude,
up.
but I mean, as far as what's next for Michael Morales, I think you didn't want to push the gas pedal too hard on what he should do next. Obviously, just coming off this win, and not that I think not that UFC would be. I don't think he's on a fast track, anyways. Like, he's where he is now because he really is very good and capable of it. But this guy's coming off a loss, sure, but tell me Carlos Prates wouldn't make an absolute fireworks kind of fight
I was
between
thinking
those two.
about that too. I didn't want to say it though because I was like, you know how the UFC is with booking, you know, a guy coming off a win versus a guy coming off a loss, especially someone like Prates, who I think that they still see a bright future with. And like, I don't know. I was saying like maybe the winner of Usman versus Buckley, but like I don't see Usman wanting a fight with Michael Morales. Buckley maybe not either. Not because Buckley doesn't think he could beat him, but I just maybe think that if Buckley beats Usman, he's not going to be looking back. He's going to be looking forward. But then you, like I said, you have guys like Ian Gary who will fight anybody. And like he said it multiple times, and he's proven it too. I mean, he fought Shavkat on short notice. He fought Prates on short notice. I think if the UFC were to come to him with a Michael Morales fight, he's not opposed to taking it. He was literally talking just before we started recording to Ariel, talking about how he wants to stay active. He doesn't want to be one of these guys who sits on the number and waits for a title fight, because he's like, right now we have JDM versus Islam Makhachev, and we don't even really know when that's going to be yet. And then Shavkat is still there in the background, and you can't really say that it's impossible that he still gets a title shot, because look what just happened with JDM. So I kind of see where he's coming from, and I love that he wants to fight, because like I said, I just feel like we're coming off this era where these guys just didn't want to fight each other. And yeah, I just think welterweight's in a really great spot right now. And then, you know, like you mentioned, we have this new title fight that's going to be coming. We don't know when. Islam Makhachev, he's vacating the lightweight title, moving up to 170 to fight Jack Della Maddalena. And then that sets up the vacant lightweight title fight that got booked too at UFC 317 between Charles Oliveira and Ilia Topuria. And like, it's we were literally talking about how UFC 315 was going to answer a lot of these questions. I don't know about you. I didn't think it was going to be within the next week. You know, I figured we were going to have to wait a couple of months before we got some news. But literally the week after, Islam moves up, and now we have an Ilia Topuria fight at UFC 317 in basically about a month. So things move fast in this world, man. And but even besides that, like, there's just so many fights that we could get into. Like, you know, even for UFC 317, the co-main of that, Pantoja versus Cara France, that's a really good fight. UFC 318 is Dustin Poirier's final fight versus Max Holloway. UFC 319, Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev in Chicago. I feel like that fight almost got swept under the radar because of all the news at 170 and 155. But that's an insane fight, man.
Can I mention something regarding Pantoja and the flyweight division?
Yeah.
And how it's seen in the lens of UFC, or either the UFC higher-ups or just the fan base, the casual fan base. But Alexander Pantoja, who was already someone very capable way before he won the title, which you've talked about obviously a lot. Now that he does have the title and he's defended it multiple times, I feel like the guy still can't get a huge break in terms of a bunch of recognition and praise, because I see he's ranked, he's the 10th ranked pound for pound fighter right now.
Yeah, I mean, I could double check that, but you're probably not far off if I had to guess.
And I don't know that's something to do with I don't know that's something to do with just not that the flyweight division is. I know the flyweight division at a time was on life support, but at least now it's a lot of excitement to it. It's just okay. Maybe a lot of people don't know as much about a lot of these guys yet, or I guess maybe okay. You got Ursay and Asakura, two guys kind of just thrust right into that title fight, but like Alexander Pantoja, I don't know if it's gonna take this Kai Kara France fight to do it, but
I think this will be a big one. I really do, because the thing with Pantoja, and this is why I would always talk about him getting a title shot before he won the title. Like, he's already fought a lot of the best flyweights, like from that old guard, and now I think during his title reign, I feel like some of the reason why Pantoja doesn't get that credit is because the UFC has had to kind of manufacture some contenders for him by bringing up a guy like Urseg and pushing him, or bringing in Kai Asakura from Ryzen. Like, this fight versus Kara France is really a fight now against a guy who's been in the UFC for a while. He's had a lot of exciting finishes, and I think like the general fan base knows him a lot more than they maybe knew those other guys. I think Pantoja, like, his best wins and the wins he gets the most credit for are the ones against Moreno, because I think UFC fans know that Moreno is that dude, and the fact that Pantoja's beaten him 3 times is like pretty damn awesome. I hope that if he gets this win, he'll get that recognition. I don't know, maybe if we see him go up to bantamweight, he'd get more, but I just don't know if that's even a possibility for him, honestly. I know he expressed interest when O'Malley was champion, because he wanted to get revenge for the infamous sparring match that they had where O'Malley dropped him with the body shot. That
would be
it could be interesting. I would love to see him versus Merab, but it's just like, because Merab's not a huge guy in terms of like height and reach, so I don't know. I think Pantoja is one of the better fighters out of the champions right now, and like you, I do wish he got more credit for that. I don't know, it could just be a flyweight thing though. I feel like that those lower weight classes get disrespected in like a lot of combat sports. I mean, me and you've had how many conversations about Inoue and boxing, and it's not really the same, but it is similar. I mean, Inoue would, I guess, be a better comparison to like someone like Demetrius Johnson, because that was always the narrative with Demetrius, is like, yeah, he's this insane mixed martial artist, but like, how was it that he was that good and he was making the competition look so bad, or was it that the competition wasn't that strong? Like, it's you can debate that till the end of time. There's no way of knowing it. But yeah, it's funny. We were talking before the pod. I feel like we thought we were going to get into a bigger conversation about like Makachev, Topuria, and then meanwhile here we are talking about the flyweight division. We literally were saying before we got on, like, we don't really know where this podcast is going to go, because usually we have like more fights that we were going to talk about, but this time we were like, all right, let's talk about some of these fight bookings and see where it goes. Little did we know that we were about to have a whole conversation about the flyweight division, but hey, that's how it works sometimes. That's how exciting the UFC is, honestly, right now. What's up, guys? Sorry to interrupt the podcast real quick, but we have a message for you guys.
If you enjoy her handbook's content, you want to see more, consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like on the videos, all sorts of fight content as much as possible, podcasts, interviews, vlogs. We have it all over here, so thank you, appreciate it.
We appreciate you, and like he said, please subscribe, and now back to the show. And then we could still talk about these fights, but to get into like another thing that makes the UFC so excited, because I do want to talk about it, because this news like really hyped me up when they announced it on the Apex broadcast. Patchy Mix signing with the UFC. The PFL loses another huge name. We found that out like early last week. Days later, signs with the UFC. He will be fighting Mario Bautista at UFC 316. I mean,
womp womp wow.
It's an awesome pickup by the UFC. You can't blame them. I mean, and especially
Oh yeah,
after it's
it's like
so.
clockwork for UFC at this point. It's just picking out the talent, spotting the talent, whether it's overseas in One and Ryzen or it's still here in the States with PFL. I mean,
And the thing is, like, it makes the UFC that much better, and then it makes the PFL look that much worse because this is another guy in Patchy Mix who had a pretty tumultuous exit with the PFL. One of those guys like Pitbull who was talking on social media months before this about how he can't get a fight booked. They keep, kind of dicking him around, for lack of a better term. And it sucks because, he's fought one time, I think, in 18 months since the PFL acquired Bellator, and like that's just such a misuse of such a good fighter. Patchy Mix, this is a guy who, in my opinion, can contend for UFC gold, and now we get to see him in the UFC bantamweight division. And it just sucks that these awesome fighters pretty much have to beg for fights. And it's not like the PFL ever had a bad roster, because they didn't have a bad roster, and then they got Bellator, and the roster was even better, and honestly could have competed with the UFC, but then they fumble this. Like I was watching Luke Thomas talk about it before, and I want to pull this up. I screenshotted it. Maybe I'll put it in the video too, because anyone who's been watching us for a while knows that I'm a big fan of Luke Thomas and his work. I think him and Ariel are the best gold standard of MMA media. But since the PFL acquired Bellator, Cyborg has fought there once. Ryan Bader fought there one time. He's gone. Aaron Pico fought there once. He's in the UFC now. Patricio Pitbull fought once. He's in the UFC now. They've made good use of Jason Jackson, decent use of AJ McKee. Corey Anderson has only fought once since being under the PFL banner. Usman Nurmagomedov, I think that they've done a decent job with him. Obviously, his fight versus Paul Hughes was phenomenal, but like, where did they go from there? Like, you know what I mean? You have to build on that. And Paul Hughes has had a fight since then, which is good. And I think that the rematch versus Nurmagomedov could be an option at some point. But outside of that, there's not really much that gets the needle moving. And then, like, there's another one, Dakota Dacheva. She's another fighter who I think is UFC ready right now, but she's just she's not in the tournament that they have every year at this point because she just won it last year. She's one of the bigger names now. But, like, they don't really have a spot for those bigger names. And that's why they're losing a lot of these people, because you have these top level talents and you're just not giving them fights. And I think that that's inexcusable. And you know this, like, from the beginning with the PFL, I really wanted to, like, give them their credit when they've earned it. But they just haven't earned it, really. And it sucks because they have all the tools to do well and compete with the UFC, and they've kind of fumbled it in a big way. And you're seeing more fighters leave, and now their talent isn't the same. It's just I think that they've really fumbled it, man. And now Patchy mixes with the UFC, and I'm super happy for him. I'm glad he is, because now he gets to prove himself versus the best fighters in the world and maybe fight for a UFC title in a short amount of time. But I don't know. I kind of went on like a whole rant there. I mean, if you want to add to it or go wherever you feel, that's up to you.
well, what it's gonna have to truly be going forward, if it wasn't already, which I don't think so, because obviously these fighters were still on the roster, but it's gonna have to be ex. So, like, Francis Ngannou, for instance, like ex UFC stars.
I didn't even bring him up. Like, that's fought one time since he's
Yep.
gone there, and that's not as much PFL's fault. I'll give them that, but still, like, you have literally the guy who vacated the heavyweight title.
It's legit an inverse of what UFC is. So UFC is signing them from PFL/Bellator to propel them even more into a star, whereas if UFC either cuts someone loose or somebody just is ready to is just up in their old age and can't really hang with the top UFC talent anymore, then they're gonna go to PFL and get an even better paycheck and not have to fight that much, not have to fight that often. And when they do fight, that's when PFL is going to try to leverage it into something bigger than it might actually be. And I don't even want, I hate that I even say that, because when Francis Ngannou did fight and come back, it was a big deal. And they did do a good job of...
Probably one of their best moments since the merger.
Yeah.
That and the PFL versus Bellator card are really the only two times since then that I could say the PFL did a great job. And the Nurmagomedov Hughes fight.
They've really shot themselves in the foot this time.
It sucks, man, because I want to... It's so much better for the sport when there's good competition. I was telling you before the show, I've been going back and I've been watching like just a playlist of like all the Joe Rogan MMA shows. And like there's some, and this is like 2017, 2018. And this is like about when I was really getting into the sport hardcore. And they were talking about different Bellator fights and fighters. And I almost like forgot how awesome Bellator was at one point. And like... That's why they were actually a competitor with the UFC. You know, they weren't on the UFC's level, but like they were keeping the UFC honest. Right now, the UFC is basically on autopilot, and the PFL can't even sniff them, and that says a lot, man.
Yeah.
Like it's really hard to watch, and it sucks because there's so many good fighters under that PFL roster, and some of them are being misused, some of them aren't being promoted well enough, and I really think that that's mostly the PFL's fault, and it sucks. And I hope that they can turn it around. I don't know if they can, honestly, at this point. They still have a lot of those good fighters. They still have Francis Ngannou. You know, there's a lot that they could do there, and they do have some good series that they do. Like,
yeah.
You know, that's the other thing. They're a little convoluted.
I mean,
they have so many different things that they
do. The merger almost literally like handed them these people that were ready to up their brand and their star power even more. You have all these champions, bona fide champions coming in, and you know you're doing the big first event where you're stacking up your champions against them. But
which I'm not gonna lie, can I say this? Even though that event was great, in hindsight, seeing where they are now might have been a really bad idea, because now you just wasted all those fights.
Yeah, in hindsight, not good, But like the point I'm trying to really get at is more so, well, it had something to do with.
You don't have it now, but it's going to be good. I know
that. Yeah. No, I was trying to give just the PFL a little bit of praise, or it's more so, hey, yes, you know, you still have to mold people into stars and have people sell fights that way, but you just got a huge leg up with the merger of another promotion, whereas that should be a lot easier now, and they didn't really do anything with it.
And now half those people are gone.
Yeah,
and it's like you just, and I don't think
because it was one thing when it was just PFL on its own. They already had the $1 million tournament. That was so Dakota Dacheva, for instance. That was a good way to propel these really good fighters and create stars, market people that market people that way.
PFL, right?
Mm-hmm. So, but your roster, obviously, front and back it's very thin and limited compared to UFC. So no one's gonna, the pressure to rival UFC and be the true number 2 isn't so much there. It's just, hey, there's another pretty good MMA alternative. They're not that big yet, but you got a lot of big names trying to market. You got the ESP, they're on ESPN as well. So there's things going, and then it seemed like the Bellator deal was going to really get them where they needed to be.
Yeah, I think some of it, too, is that the PFL's trying too much to be different with all the different things that they have. I don't hate the tournament. I think that that's worked pretty well for them over the years, but I also think that, like Bellator Champion Series or, like, all these different things that they have, like, it's just a lot to follow.
Is it
I think if they just had cards the way
would
they
you
do...
say it's trying to play up... Not that it's trying to play up to a gimmick, but it comes off as very gimmicky.
I don't even think... Well, I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. This is just, like, my opinion. I think that some of it is just because, like... Look at Bellator. I just mentioned how back in, like, not even that long ago, like 6-7 years ago, they were a really good number 2 to the UFC. And I think of their model, right? They had fight cards, like the UFC does, just normal fight cards. and then they would have the tournaments that they would have the Grand Prix, almost like Pride did. Those were really fun. And then also at points they had Bellator kickboxing, which didn't really catch on, but like in hindsight, that was really fun. They had a lot of good fighters in that. And it's just like, I'm trying to think of how the PFL maybe could have gone more in a direction like that and maybe cut out some of these different things that they have. Because I think some of the reason at first why they needed these different types of events that was not similar to how the UFC does things is because they didn't have the roster to compete. But now when you acquire something like Bellator, you have a roster that not necessarily is as good as the UFC, but is like a clear number two. It's just, I think that they could have gotten rid of some of these extra types of series that they have and then maybe made it more traditional with the tournament that they have. Because, like I said, I don't think the tournament is bad at all. And it sucks because it comes like we're shitting on the PFL a little bit here, but at the same time, we're also pointing out the good things that they do. And it's more so, it's not saying that, like, man, the PFL stinks. It's saying, man, I wish the PFL would go more in the direction of the things that was making them good in the first place, rather than kind of trying to distance the way that they do things from the UFC's way of doing things. I think that the UFC's way of doing things is why they're number one. So I don't necessarily think you have to distance yourself from that to overtake them. I think that they could have just had these guys fighting on regular cards and it could have rivaled the UFC, but I think at this point so many of them have left and their reputation has taken such a hit because of how many fighters have publicly criticized their way of doing things. It's an uphill battle for them now, man, and I truly hope that they could still, come back and make themselves a true number two and maybe compete with the UFC someday. But I'll say this, now compared to when they had just acquired Bellator, I think that the road is way longer now than it was at that point, and that's mainly their own fault.
Well, because it's also, if maybe even mainly about making MMA more known and more widespread rather than yo, you train UFC, bro? Yeah. No, you train MMA, like, it's so other brands and promotions. Imagine that in an alternate universe.
Yeah. But that's not the PFL's fault. I shouldn't even make that joke. Yeah, like,
it's just the point and the principle is just the more eyes you get on the sport and all that, then that's the better it's gonna do for your brand and your company. So it may be one day you can get to the point where you can be like UFC and just kind of cruise and be on autopilot. Like, we don't have to try so hard. It's just, this is when the pay-per-view is every month. And then we'll have International Fight Week. And then after that, we're just making a push towards the end of the year. Probably the events get, even bigger here and there. But even if you want to talk about UFC 300, it was just, all right, we're just gonna add more fights, and they're all gonna be super meaningful. And it's just, but what is definitely unmatched on UFC's end is just the matchups they make. Knowing what matchups they make, like, very rarely does UFC make just a straight up bad matchup.
And Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard deserve so much credit for that, because yes, like, Dana White's the president of the UFC, Hunter Campbell obviously does a lot too. But those guys are the ones who are in the war room going through all these matchups from the prelims all the way to the main event. And, you look at a card, bring it full circle, like this UFC Apex card. Yes, like, there's not as many big names, but when you watch that card from the beginning to end, all those fights were awesome. Like, and that says a lot. And yes, it's maybe not as marquee box office type feel as maybe some people want, but you can't complain about the quality of fights. And with the PFL, it's really been a mix of both of those things. It's like not really,
and that's also why they can afford to. That's also why they can afford to now get to UFC Vegas 106, and people are still gonna tune in. People are still gonna watch and be very heavily invested.
Did you notice that the whole time we were talking about that in the beginning? By the way, I never once said what number they were on. I've lost track. After you, and I'm not even shitting on them. Like, that's just the truth. Like, me and you were so amped for UFC Vegas 100, and that was a great podcast. Honestly, after that, it was a fun time. And after that, though, like, now I'm just, I'm gonna wait for UFC Vegas 200, and that's gonna be a big one. We have to hope that that's even bigger. But I don't know, man. Like, to end it like on a positive, I think that the UFC, even though they are on autopilot, like I said, they're still giving us a lot of good fights. And the PFL, even though they've lost a lot of their talent at this point, there's still a lot of really good fighters there. We keep bringing up Dakota Ducheva and Paul Hughes. Like, they still have an opportunity there. Usman Nurmagomedov is still there.
Yeah,
It's
they
just,
do. They do.
they got to do better,
Yeah.
But
Maybe once we get to UFC Vegas 200, they can paint the canvas again. Yellow.
Yellow. Oh, I hope they do, actually. That'd be a good idea. What were they thinking?
Yeah, it seems like a lifetime ago.
That was a horrible idea by the UFC. And the UFC 200 was a disaster. That's not necessarily the UFC's fault. I mean, when you go, now we're talking about events that were years ago, but I mean, this pod, I think, from the very beginning has just been all over the place. And maybe people will love that, maybe people will hate it. I hope they love it. I'm having a good time. But it is fun to just kind of like go back sometimes and think about like the past and fighting and how things have evolved like to where they are now. And like I said, I didn't really talk about it as much as like I really wanted to. And I don't really know like how I'd get into it, because it's really one of those things. It's just I'm going to be talking about fights that I remember and like. But like when Bellator was still around, man, and like they were really like the clear number 2 and actually competing with the UFC on some weekends, like I think about some of these fights. And you remember Roy McDonald and Douglas Lima, how when they fought a couple of times, like they had some really good fights. And they just had so many, not stars necessarily, but, well, stars in the MMA world, though. I mean, there were people who were very well respected. And even now, like, the PFL still has a lot of people like that. And I hope that they can kind of get themselves back from where they are now. But, like, it's just so hard because, you had Pitbull, Patchy Mix. I think even Cyborg was saying stuff about the PFL at some point, although I think that that's kind of cooled down a bit. Obviously, look at all the people who've left for the UFC. I mean, Patchy Mix, Pitbull, Aaron Pico is another one who was talking about it publicly. Kayla Harrison, she's going to be fighting for the UFC title in less than a month in New Jersey here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you just got to look at it sometimes. I mean, Mike, you can go even further if you want to go to Bellator. I mean, Michael Chandler, he left there. It's crazy how many great fighters have gone to the UFC or have expressed.
Well, so much so that, UFC choosing not to mention Bellator, PFL at all, that's one thing.
They don't need to.
They don't need to. I don't understand that. But when it comes to these former fighters that cross over to UFC and they get these big spots on these pay-per-views, and you have Joe Rogan and even Daniel Cormier and John Anik, obviously, who've been watching for years and years and know nothing but the best fighters to ever exist, because they've all come to UFC at some point. They're talking about their time in the past, like Bellator, either like A, it never even happened, or B, it's like totally irrelevant, because it's like, okay, in that moment, obviously, that who's across from them right there, like, that really doesn't matter in the moment, but what they did in the past still matters. It's why they're here now in the UFC on the spot. It's not like...
And why they started at such a high point.
They just picked a name out of the hat and it's like, you're going to fight at this point on the card, on the main card. Like, so that's another thing. They have to legitimize themselves to the point where that even the commentary on UFC pay-per-views, they can attest, like, he fought this guy on this card however many years ago, and how it translates to his fight, that they're commentating. So.
You know what I've actually been really intrigued by lately? And we were talking about Patchy Mix and Mario Bautista, and I think that's going to be a really good fight. Stylistically, I think it's an interesting one. But like Aaron Pico coming over, I keep seeing rumors that they might book him against Movsar Evloev. Like, whew.
Well, Evloev definitely needs a fight.
That could be a good one, though.
I don't think anyone in that featherweight division wants to fight that guy.
But Pico, he's somebody who has a lot of potential, and I'm curious how he would do against a guy like Evloev. That's an interesting fight to me, and I hope that that's not just rumors and that we do end up seeing it at some point. But I'm curious of what they're going to do with him, because like I say to myself, if there's rumors about him fighting Evloev, then there has to be some weight to that, like that they want to start him up high in the rankings. Because I wasn't sure if they were going to start him up in that like top 10 or top 5, but Evloev's near. I mean, you could argue that Evloev deserves a title shot next. So if they put Pico up against him, that shows you what the UFC thinks of his talent. And again, this is a guy who was publicly talking about not getting fights for the PFL and wanting to fight and wanting out. And even when he was still, I think, happy with the PFL, he was kind of talking about wanting to fight in the UFC someday. And it's kind of funny. This might be like a bad comparison because it's not even the same sport. And I think that their places are a little different. But like I sometimes think about, like, because I'm a big Formula One fan, how a lot of drivers, they want to race for Ferrari. And like, even like when they're on other teams, like everybody knows that like everybody kind of wants to race with that team because of how prestigious they are. And like I said, it's a little different because Ferrari isn't even the best team in Formula One right now. It's just that they have the best legacy. But the UFC right now, like the reason why I compare the two is because the UFC has that same level of like prestige that everyone wants. Even if they're happy where they are, you still think about that. And like I think that that's an interesting place to be. But you know, the sport's in an interesting spot right now. I think the UFC is in a place where we don't have many huge pay-per-view stars that we used to have, like Ronda, Conor McGregor. You know, we still have like Jon Jones, but Jon, I mean, I don't know if that fight ever happens at this point. I'm actually starting to not really hold my breath on it. I feel so bad for Tom Aspinall, man, because you know, you think of Jon, like Jon was he was really hyped up when he was going through the ranks at light heavyweight, and you think about guys who gave him that chance. You know, Ryan Bader, before the title fight, you know, you had Shogun Rua giving him a fight, and then like even the legends that Jon beat, you know, to make his resume so great, like it sucks because he was given that chance. You'd think that he'd want to do it the right way and give Tom Aspinall a shot. But it sucks, man, because Tom Aspinall deserves that, and he's fought what? I mean, let me go on his Tapology. When was his last fight at this point? November?
John against Stipe, when was that?
Well, that was November, but I'm talking about Aspinall.
Oh, Tom Aspinall.
Because he defended the belt, the interim belt.
Shit,
so I'm trying to look now.
man.
Like, so he fought November 11th, 2023, and won the interim title versus Sergey Pavlovich. And then he fought Curtis Blades in July of 2024. So we're nearing like a year since his last fight. And he's had the interim title for like a year and a half now. He's defended it. Like, it sucks, man. Like, this dude's in the midst of his prime and we're just wasting it because Jon doesn't want to fight him. And, you know, I don't necessarily think Jon needs to fight him to preserve his legacy or anything. I think he's already built that. But it's just like from a pure sporting perspective and from a fan perspective, like you want to see the best fight the best. And it's like if you don't want to fight Tom Aspinall, give up the belt. And like, you know me, I'm usually pretty down the middle with this type of stuff. But it's like, yes, Jon's great. Jon doesn't need to fight Tom Aspinall. But you're sitting on the title. Like what he's doing right now at heavyweight is not impressive. He's fought his first win against Gon. I was really impressed by that. The Stipe one, not as much, just because of where Stipe is at in his career, or was at, because he retired right after. It just stinks when you see a guy who deserves the title shot just sitting there wasting his prime away, waiting for a guy who I truly don't even know if he's going to end up fighting. And it just sucks that I swear ESPN MMA was trolling on YouTube when they put this up in the community tab at one point a few weeks ago. They were talking about how Jon had just gotten into second place for the longest heavyweight title reign. I'm like, yeah, well, it's pretty easy when you're not fighting. Like, and there's an interim champion. Like, it's not like it's even undisputed. So it's really unfortunate, man. I don't know. You know, we were kind of talking about some of the things that the PFL doesn't do well at this point. You know, if you want to give any critique to the UFC, it's their lack of stepping into this situation with Jon Jones, because it's like, yes, Jon's earned the right to do whatever he wants, but I don't know. It's just holding up the division, and it's holding up the sport, and it's holding up this guy, Tom Aspinall, who deserves a fight. You know what I mean? He deserves this fight.
Yeah, that's long story short. But to kind of bring it full circle back to the welterweight division,
Sure.
just in general, and um, how much more interesting it is than, let's say, the heavyweight division right now. Um, I just think just even I think you already have the, in a way you have the personalities and stuff, but it's just really the fighting style that I just think there's so much versatility throughout where you can get a hell of a fight on the ground or you can get a hell of a fight on the feet as well. When you
You talking about welterweight?
yeah, when you compare and contrast that with other divisions across UFC, just I think if you go down, it's probably and then this goes for pace too. I think just even over. So we just saw with Jack Della Maddalena and Bilal Muhammad, for instance. I think you go down like flyweight, for instance. These in a way it's kind of like a weird inverse of heavyweight where heavyweight might as well never even have 5 round fights, but flyweight's like it can either end in a blink or it can go the whole way and they could still go another 5 rounds and you still wouldn't really know who won. Bantamweight, kind of the same, but Marab is just a total anomaly and how he grapples and how much of that bulldog Muay Thai pace is. Like that's why he's the champ. And then featherweight is very in flux, which I've said multiple times at this point this year.
Because Volk's already fought.
Yeah,
people,
exactly.
So they don't really know what they want to
exactly. You had Volk already had this stronghold on the division, and then it went from Ilya. So, I mean,
to go to lightweight, if we're going in order, I thought this was interesting. There has not been a changing of the belt in the octagon since Conor McGregor beat Eddie Alvarez for the title at UFC 205 in 2016, I think that is. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Because you think about, Conor won the title.
Yeah.
I think they stripped him, right? Yeah, they stripped him. And then Khabib fought Iaquinta. That was for the vacant title.
Yeah.
Khabib won all those fights, vacated because he retired. Then it was Oliveira versus Chandler for the vacant title. Oliveira missed weight in that one fight. So then I think it was, him and Gaethje, I think was...
Yeah.
That was a vacant one. And then what's after that? I mean, Oliveira had... Then... Actually, wait, didn't... Didn't he miss... How did his... Because Islam beat Oliveira, right? But I think Oliveira missed weight. Did he miss weight?
Nah, I couldn't really tell you, to be honest.
That's interesting. Now, maybe I could be wrong. I saw it online, so blame ESPN MMA, not me. They screwed up if I'm wrong. But, I don't know. I mean, either way, there's just been a lot of vacant title fights, and now we have another one with Charles Oliveira and Topuria. It's just interesting how that's happened.
Yeah, the lightweight just seems to have the most dominant champions.
Yeah, and then they just leave.
Yeah, they just leave. Exactly.
It sucks, man. I really wanted to see Islam Makhachev versus Ilia Topuria, and we're probably not going to get to see it.
And then Islam 185 and 205, I just think bring a lot more methodical kind. I think you usually see, because I just think they bring the most kind of unorthodox sort of fight. So like Dreykus 2 plus C,
they're all the memes about that, dude.
Yeah.
I saw one. It was like when Hamzat shoots for a takedown. And
Sean Strickland, Paulo Costa, all of these guys pretty much at middleweight.
I saw a meme. It was when Hamzat shoots for the first takedown. This is how
DDP
would defend it. It was. I think it was like Tom and Jerry or like one of those old shows. And he gets like a bucket. He's in like the Arctic, and he basically gets a bucket of like cold frozen water and like throws it at the guy. It was the Roadrunner. I think it was one of those ones. I think it was the Roadrunner, and he picks up a bucket and throws it at Wile E. Coyote, and it's just like an ice wall, so he just can't get through. It's like all the different things that DDP might do to defend a takedown versus Hamzat. I mean, that's a really good fight, man. I said in the beginning how that almost got overshadowed.
Excited for that.
Yeah, that should be really interesting. I mean, Hamzat's another one, undefeated. Had some interesting fights in there. But,
yeah.
I think in short, to kind of wrap a bow on all this, the UFC has some insane fights coming up over the summer. I mean, even the fight nights are insane. I mean, the next one at the end of May is Erin Blanchfield versus Macy Barber. That's a big fight for the flyweights. Excuse me. UFC 316, June 7th. Week after that, you have Usman versus Buckley. Week after that, Hill versus Roundtree Jr. Then International Fight Week, Topuria versus Oliveira, Pantoja versus Cara France. I think the Derek Lewis headliner in Nashville is in early July, but then like 318, you have Holloway Poirier 3. That card with Rob Whittaker and De Ritter just got announced. And then, like I said, Duplessis versus Chimaev is in August. Like, this is what a run the UFC has coming up, man. It's gonna be tough to beat. You know, we were talking about the PFL. I think if they mount a challenge, it's not gonna be for the rest of 2025. I think that's pretty much certain. But a lot going on in the MMA world, even though we had like just an Apex fight card. I feel like we still have a lot to talk about. Next week, there are no UFC fights, so no podcast. Might try and make a video to fill the gap. We'll see about that. Depends on if I can secure it or if I maybe want to take a little bit of a break. Just because the UFC schedule, it's never ending. But yeah, we'll see if there's a video. Obviously, follow us on social media at The Hurt Handbook on all of our platforms, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Yeah, there'll definitely be an update on that probably later in the week. But yeah, and then the next fight recap that we'll be doing is Blanchfield versus Barber, probably in the very, very beginning of June. So can't wait to talk about all these crazy fights that are coming up. And hope you guys enjoyed this one. This one, I feel like this episode really was all over the place. Who knows? Let us know if you guys like this structure of it, because maybe we'll try and have more pods like this one. But yeah, it's been real. Thanks, guys. Easy guess. Hey, loca.